What's going on, everybody? C4 here, and welcome back to the 32-team 7-round mock draft series. Today, we're looking at the team that holds the 13th overall pick in the first round, the Miami Dolphins, with a brand new head coach, Brian Flores, who was, I think, the Patriots linebacking coach and assistant defensive coordinator under Bill Belichick. And as someone that has gone on record saying, I think right now, for today's NFL landscape, you should try to go like offensive, get a QB guru for your head coach if you don't have your franchise quarterback. Then with that being said, you see teams in Zach Taylor and Cliff Kingsbury and like pretty much anyone that talks to Sean McVay or worked for Sean McVay getting a head coaching job. I kind of like the Brian Flores contract. I like that for the Miami Dolphins. I think they could have went and tried to continue to mimic, everyone trying to get the next Sean McVay. They kind of went more old school and try to get someone else from the Belichick coaching tree. And I think personally, Belichick and Andy Reid coaching trees, I'd be trying to get those guys. I mean, Patricia looked pretty successful. You have the Titans down there. Mike Vrabel with the Titans, he's been pretty well, all things considered. So I think ultimately when you look at the head coaching hires, brand new head coaches, Brian Flores is, I think, better than a lot of people are giving them credit. So with that being said, the one thing I want to do in this draft, especially at pick 13, is for a brand new coach like Brian Flores that isn't, quarterback savvy or anything like that. I wasn't going to have them get the pressure of a brand new quarterback in the first round. They brought in Ryan Fitzpatrick in free agency. He is, we saw last year, man, there was a point in time, obviously it was pretty early on, that Ryan Fitzpatrick was considered the MVP favorite, which is absolutely ridiculous, but it was true, man. He was on fire for the first 5 weeks. So I think having him as your bridge quarterback for this season, you could do a lot worse. I still think, and I'm kind of shocked, and it seems like it was more so the players' decision that the Dolphins didn't get Teddy Bridgewater, but ultimately for this mock draft, I'm not going to have Brian Flores have the added pressure of drafting a quarterback in the first round and trying to develop him right away. But we still have them getting a quarterback fairly early. That being said, at pick 13, are the Miami Dolphins selecting Rashon Gary, defensive lineman from Michigan. I think he's going to be a perfect fit for Brian Flores' defense. Ultimately, we don't really know what he's going to run, so I'm just going to kind of use Matt Patricia as an example. They're going to run that multiple front defense, mostly in a 4-3, but sometimes they go to a 3-4. I think ultimately, if you're running that scheme, a guy like Rashan Gary is a perfect fit for your defense. We already know what he brings from an athletic standpoint. He's an exceptional athlete, an absolutely elite athlete. But I think in a multiple front, he can play defensive end, he can play defensive tackle. Because he's such a good athlete, he pretty much will just not leave the field. And really, when you look at the Miami Dolphins defense, they've changed the guard here. They're getting rid of some of the old heads. Cam Wake's gone, unfortunately. That's probably sad for a lot of Dolphins fans. William Hayes is gone. You got Charles Harris, the first-round pick in 2017. You're going to hope he can develop. Godchaux from LSU, fifth-rounder in 17 as well. You're going to hope that he can continue to develop. But outside of that, there's still 2 spots up for grabs on that defensive line. I think Rashon Gary can start right away. Now, there is some red flags with Rashon Gary. He only has 9.5 career sacks, which for a player of his caliber playing on a defense that is the Michigan defense, you would expect maybe a little bit more production. But I think ultimately Brian Flores is going to see the upside and kind of think that he can mold and develop Rashon Gary into that next potential all-pro type defensive lineman. I think that's too good of a deal to pass up. Plus, a DC. He's got to want a defensive guy, I think, early. And like I said, I made the announcement that we're not getting the pressure of a potential franchise quarterback in a weak QB class for the first round for Flores in his first year as a head coach. So get a guy like Rashan Gary, see what he can do, and trust that Flores is a good hire, and we'll be able to get someone like Rashan Gary and reach his full potential under his wing. So moving into the second round, though, at pick 48, I'm selecting Daniel Jones, quarterback from Duke. Now, when you do mock drafts, it's always tough to mock quarterbacks because teams always trade up, teams always overdraft. So, is Daniel Jones going to be there at pick 48? Probably not. But I think in this ideal scenario, I think Daniel Jones absolutely can slip into the second round. And if I'm the Miami Dolphins, I actually might be trading up for Daniel Jones. I think any way you cut it, Daniel Jones in the second round, give me that all day versus gambling on we're going to have a high pick in 2020. Let's get a QB there. You know what I'm saying? I think Daniel Jones in the second round, he brings everything that you want. You have your bridge quarterback in Ryan Fitzpatrick. Daniel Jones, you get the traits, height, weight, speed type guy at quarterback, great athlete, cannon of an arm, but he just needs that redshirt year. He needs that ease-in process to becoming a National Football League quarterback. I think you can get that and offer that to him here for the Miami Dolphins with Ryan Fitzpatrick as your current starter. But I think that's ultimately where I kind of view this pick is I think he'll be there in the second round. Give me Daniel Jones in the second round, like I said, versus saying, well, we're going to suck next year and maybe we'll get, a top 3 pick to be able to select a Justin Herbert or Tua Tagovailoa next season. I feel like that could still happen, but I think right now in the second round, getting a guy like Daniel Jones, who if he was to say come out next year, probably would still be about this range. A fringe first-round quarterback, a guy that brings a lot of traits, but is going to need a little bit of developing. He's going to need a good offensive coordinator, QB coach. They got Chad O'Shea there in Miami. I'm not super familiar with him, but I just think all day long, Daniel Jones in the second round. If you're the Dolphins, you still need a franchise quarterback. Give me that gamble. Going into the third round at pick 78, I'm selecting Justin Lane, cornerback from Michigan State. Converted, Michigan State wide receiver, now playing cornerback. Where is that? That sounds familiar for the Miami Dolphins. Oh, it was Tony Lippett, except Justin Lane's actually pretty good at playing corner. He's a long man cover corner. And I think ultimately Brian Flores is going to want to try and find his potential Stephon Gilmore. You have Xavier Howard there, who actually had, he's one of those guys. He's one of those guys not enough people talk about. And you look at the interceptions, so the turnover numbers have been there. He's been like top of the league the last 2 years. So a guy like Justin Lane, outside of Xavier Howard, there's a lot of upside there. But when you look outside of Xavier Howard right now on the current roster, you have Bobby McCain, you can play nickel. That's pretty much it. You have Tankersley, Eric Rowe. There you go. That's pretty much where the list stops. So a guy like Justin Lane in the third, I feel like that's appropriate where he needs to go. Very similar to Rashan Gary. He's another player that I think has a very high ceiling, but he's going to need a coach to develop him. And again, if you gave Brian Flores this head coaching job over, say, going with a flashy offensive guy, you better have been confident that Brian Flores is going to be able to get these defensive players and get the most out of them and develop them into taking that next step in their professional careers. So again, I'm gambling. I'm putting the benefit of the doubt into Brian Flores' hands that he can develop the Rashon Garys. He can develop the third round pick Justin Lane into being starters very, very early in their career and reaching their full potential. Going into the fourth round at pick 116, I was selecting Chuma Okeke, offensive lineman from USC. He is a very high trait offensive lineman. He's great at getting to the second level. He can play offensive tackle, might be more better suited to inside at guard in the National Football League. And pretty much from all scouting reports, he would go higher if he didn't have some attitude issues. And I think the Dolphins as a franchise have shown a willingness to get players like this, Laremy Tunsil. And really, speaking of Larry Tunsil, outside of him, Miami's offensive line is awful. Looking at their current starters, you have Isaac Asiata, Daniel Kilgore, Jesse Davis, Zach Sterup. I couldn't tell you where half those guys went to school. I've never heard of them. They have a terrible, absolutely terrible offensive line. Maybe the only crime right now is they haven't gone offensive line sooner. But I think a guy like Okeke, who will slip because of some of the attitude issues, from a talent standpoint, the potential is there. I think you could probably have him challenge for a guard spot as a rookie, and as he develops the strengths, gets on that strength and conditioning program, which is probably one of his biggest hindrance right now. He's just his play strength. He might be able to develop to your other tackle outside of Laremy Tunsil. Right now, getting that offensive line better. You have time. You have Ryan Fitzpatrick on a one-year deal. Doesn't matter if your quarterback's getting beat up. He's a rental. You have time to continue to slowly build this offensive line so that next year, based upon this mock draft, Daniel Jones has ideal and ample protection. Going into the fifth round at pick 151, I was selecting Burke Irvin, linebacker from Washington. He's your undersized sideline-to-sideline cover linebacker. And for a lot of people, he came in big question marks about how he will perform at the combine. Because he's undersized, like 230 pounds, people are thinking that, he's your scrappy gym rat guy. So that's like, high 4.6, low 4.7 combine, ends up going really, really late, and it's your special teams ace. He did a lot better than expected at the combine, running a 4.56 40, a 4.09 shuttle, which were really, really good. And for most people, blew their expectations out of the water. And I think what you get with him, like I said, is special teams ability right away. But I'm looking at their roster. I think he could be linebacker 4 right now as a rookie, the top depth, and potentially be the guy that supersedes Kiko Alonso there for a really athletic and young linebacking core of Jerome Baker, Raekwon McMillan, and then you put Burke Irvin in there. Going to the 7th round, finishing up here, they have 2 7th-round picks. First up at 233, I'm selecting Hunter Renfro, wide receiver from Clemson. He debatably is a top 5 slot wide receiver, if not higher, in this year's draft class, depending on who you're asking for. But Brian Flores gets his Patriots wide receiver for this offense. When you look at the Miami Dolphins wide receiver core, they don't really have a slot. Jakeem Grant's kind of that gimmicky guy that can move all over the field. You got Albert Wilson, who can play slot, but I think ultimately getting that Patriot guy, getting that Danny Amendola replacement in the 7th round, you already know Hunter Renfro is going to make a final 53. He's not going to get overdrafted because he is such a cookie cutter slot wide receiver that grows on trees, even though for whatever reason they always get undervalued. And Hunter Renfro will probably give them like 40, 45 catches, 500 yards, 3-4 touchdowns every single year. He still will go in the 7th round. So I think for the Miami Dolphins here, get that safety net already established there. So hopefully, again, we're referring and trying to keep everything in the frame of this mock draft. When Daniel Jones becomes your starter, Mike Gesicki is another year developing the 2nd round pick in 2018. You're going to have Hunter Renfro, 2 nice safety nets for Daniel Jones when he is their assumed starter in 2020. Then finish up the draft at 234. Great value. Slipping here a lot. I have them selecting Benny Snell, the running back from Kentucky. And I look at the running back core. He's going to offer that Frank Gore style, the power back, short yardage back. Benny Snell has proven SEC production at Kentucky, but unfortunately for him, he is incredibly one-dimensional, and he's not the receiving back kind of one-dimensional, so he is going to fall in the draft. Don't necessarily know if he's going to be there in the 7th round. That's just kind of how my mock played out. But that's really good value for a guy that, for some people, depending on who you're asking, was a top 3 back for most of the draft process. But then once you really get to look at it and he kind of got exposed as really one-dimensional, not really going to ever offer much as a receiving back, didn't test particularly well at the combine, has a lot of miles on them tires there. He's probably going to be, he's definitely day 3. And I think when you're Miami, you're very happy with this pick at 234. At the bottom end of the 7th round, you're getting a guy that's going to come in and offer that dimension to your running back committee that you don't really have. You have Kenyon Drake, who's like your receiving back, more elusive guy. You have Kalen Ballage, who is a little bit bigger, but is more known for his straight line speed. And then you get a guy like Benny Snell that will be your short yardage banger. And I think there's upside with Benny Snell because, he's a guy that a lot of people thought would be a feature back at some point in the National Football League before everyone was heavily scrutinizing and really digging in deep on his tape. There's upside that he could definitely develop into that. There's a way that Miami can find a way to best utilize him. I would not be shocked if you said in 2 years' time Benny Snell is the starting running back for the Miami Dolphins. So getting that value in the 7th round, you can't go wrong for the Dolphins. So there you go, guys. That is the Miami Dolphins 7th-round mock draft. Dolphin fans in particular, let me know what you thought about this mock in the comment section below. As always, if you're first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button, smash the like button if you enjoyed, and until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.